Okay, so guys, I just want to review a little bit. Remember, we're going to have a quiz on 8.1 through 8.5 the Friday after winter break. I'm not looking at a calendar at the moment, but I believe that is on February 21st. You might double check that it's on our calendar. So I want to look at a few problems, kind of just reviewing stuff mainly from the beginning of chapter 8, not necessarily everything that'll be on that quiz. But the beginning of chapter 8 was sections that we had on our first round of cyber days, not the three we're having right now, but the last group of them. So I just want to review a little bit. We're going to review some more after winter break on the block day when we get back before our quiz, but I want you to just think through some of these. Now, on the last slide, there are, I think it's 5 questions that I want you to answer based on the stuff we're looking at here. I think one's a little bit different, but I gave you a little bit of a hint. So I want you to go through and try those. We'll talk about them on the Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what day I have you after winter break. So here's our first question. Write an exponential equation, and I gave you the form here, whose graph passes through the given points. So I'm giving you 2 points. Each one has an x and a y. What I'm going to do is try to kind of manipulate this equation knowing my x and my y's so that I can figure out the a and the b. So I'm just going to start with this first point. I'm going to plug in the y and the x. The x is 1. So if it's just 1, it's b to the first. I don't even have to write it. And I'm going to go through and solve for that a. So I'm going to divide by the b. So a equals 5 over b. Now I'm going to kind of put a box around that so I remember it, and I'm going to plug it into my equation. So in for that a right there, I'm going to plug in 5 over b. And then I've got the b to the x. Now that's great. I'm going to do the same thing with the 2, 7. So plug in the y, plug in the x. Now this is like b squared over 1. I'm going to reduce my b. So it's like 2 minus 1 is 1. So I have 5b equals 7, or b is 7 over 5. Okay, now that's good. I know my b. Let's get our a. Okay, and then I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So this is 7 over 5. I'm going to multiply by 5 over 7 and balance up here. So a is 25 over 7. Now just plugging in all of my stuff, I know my a, it's 25 over 7. And I know my b, it's 7 over 5 to the x power. Maybe I should put that in parentheses. So here's my equation. Now I want y'all to see how I'm just playing with the numbers basically. I'm plugging in one set, getting it kind of grouped together so that I can manipulate it and plug in the other one. If you had a hard time following what I did here, make sure you rewind it and watch it again step by step by step. Pause it if you need to as you're kind of working through a problem on your own. There's one like this on the practice problems at the end. Okay, the second thing I wanted to mention is equations that are in that form. You'll notice these are both in the a times bx form. Now, what I wanted y'all to go through and notice is that your b, here's your b kind of has built into it the rate increase or the rate decrease for your problem. I want you to make sure that you know this formula. B equals 1 plus the rate. Now, that means if your number is bigger than 1, your rate is increasing. You have an increasing situation. If your b is smaller than 1, like 1/8, you're going to be decreasing. Okay, now let me show you what I mean. So I know my b here. That lets me figure out my rate. I'm going to move my 1 over. My rate is 0.63. or 63%. Now, since it's positive, it's increasing. Now, if that 63.63, which I got the 63% from, was negative, it would be decreasing. That's what's going to happen in this one. I'm trying to see what happens. Okay, it would be good if I wrote the correct thing though. Let me do that one more time. Okay, so my B is 1/8, which equals 1 plus R. And my 1 I'm going to write as 8/8, just so I have a common denominator. All right, so subtract the 8/8. And I have -7/8 equals R. And I'm going to write that as a decimal. So I just put that in my calculator, which I had already done, which means I have an 87.5% decrease. Now it's decrease because of the negative. I want you to notice, I'm going to say this again, make sure you hear this. If this number is bigger than 1, you're going to end up with a positive value there, which means you're increasing. If that number is smaller than 1, you're going to end up with a negative number here, which means you're decreasing. You want to have that in your head. It'll make things a lot easier as you go through your process. All right, so I want us to graph a couple. First of all, we're going to graph an exponential, then we're going to graph a logarithm. Now, if I'm graphing exponentials, I want to start by graphing that base, which in my case is 2, to the x power. And to graph that, I'm just going to make a little t-chart. Now, I told y'all in class I like to use -1, 0, and 1. So I'm going to do that. So 2 to the -1 power is 1/2. Remember, the negative means put that 2 in the bottom. 2 to the 0 power, anything to the 0 power is 1. And 2 to the first power is 2. Now I'm going to graph those points. So -1, 1/2, 0, 1, 1, 2. Now this isn't my final answer, so I'm going to use a dotted line. Okay, now the second thing you want to do, and I'm going to put this in red, is you want to do your translations. Now in my case, I need to deal with this and this. I'm going to move it back 3, opposite of the direction you'd think, and down 1. So I'm going to take this parent function and I'm going to move everything back 3, 1, 2, 3, down 1. All 3 of my points. Back 3, 1, 2, 3, down 1. This is going to be my final graph. So you've got 2 steps here. First step, this looks a little shaky. Let me smooth that out a little bit. First step is to graph your parent function, which is going to be whatever the base is, to the x power. Use a little t-chart to do that. And then deal with your translations. Move it however you need to move it based on the numbers in your problem. You've got 2 steps. On our logarithms, we're going to have an extra step. So I want us to talk about those next. So if we're graphing logarithms, we're going to have 3 steps. The first one is the same as what we had a second ago. I'm going to graph whatever the base is to the x power. And I already had this same t-chart from a second ago. So 2 to the -1 is 1/2. Same numbers I had here. 2 to the 0 power is 1. 2 to the first is 2. Now I'm not actually going to graph these this time, because all I need those for is to get this into logarithm form. To get it into logarithm form, I'm going to do inverses. So I'm going to take these points and switch them. So 1/2 -1, see how I switched that? 1, 0, switch that, and 2, 1. Now I am actually going to plot those points. So 1/2 -1, 1, 0, 2, 1. And same as I did before, I'm going to just use a dotted line because this isn't my final answer. Then the last thing I'm going to do is translations. Now, I want y'all to notice we've got an extra step here. Instead of just 2 steps, we've got 3 because we've got this extra step in the middle to get it into logarithm form. Once I get it into logarithm form, I'm going to move it over 1, opposite the direction you'd think, so right 1, up 3. And I'm going to do that with each of my points. And sketch in my graph. So this red graph is my final. Now, this graphing, you want to get this down because I see so many mistakes on this because people will graph these 2 types the same, but they're not the same. This is logarithms, this one's exponentials. So take a little bit of time and make sure you have these clear in your head. Okay, so I just want to mention a couple of shortcuts just as a reminder. Remember, if you have something you're supposed to evaluate, try to rewrite it with the bases matching. I've got a base 5 here. I'm going to rewrite this as 5 to the 2nd power. If you can get it rewritten that way, it'll shortcut out to 2 or whatever that exponent happens to be. Okay, second reminder here. Remember, if it's just log of something, it's understood to be base 10. So if you need to get it written with the same base, you're talking about writing it as 10 to some power. So my answer here would be 3. You want to get good at these shortcuts. Your book does not emphasize them, but they will save you a lot of time and a lot of energy. Okay, one of the last things I want to mention is just a reminder on changing forms. If I ask you to change this into logarithm form, I would have log base 7 of y equals x plus 1. So just remember that pattern. You'll need to use it quite a lot. Okay, and one last one that I'm going to do. This one you could do a couple of different ways. I'm going to do this using shortcuts right here. So I'm going to rewrite square root of 16. I'm sorry, I just said that wrong. I'm going to rewrite 4 as square root of 16. Now, I picked square root of 16 because I like that these 16s are starting to match up. And then I'm going to rewrite that square root as 16 to the 1/2 power. Now, I did this the other day in class and y'all seemed okay with that. So I'm going to hope that's true here as well. Remember that I can write it as the 1/2 power because it's the exponent here over the radical. Now, y'all look at that. I can shortcut it down to 1/2. So 1/2 equals x. That's my answer. Okay, so I just went through and reviewed a little bit here. What I want you to go through and do is just have these 5 problems ready to turn in the next time I see you, which will be the Wednesday after winter break. Now, just a quick recap of all the things that are due on Wednesday from our 3 Cyber Days. First of all, 8.6a, you should have watched the podcast and done that homework. 8.6b, homework podcast, and your practice right here, which is really just meant to help start us reviewing for the quiz, which we'll do a little bit more of when we get back from winter break. All right, so that's it. Get these 5 problems done, and I will see you after winter break.